Hi, this is Brennan Davis from Bedrock Games and the Bedrock blog, and I'm doing a late night podcast. Tonight I want to talk about the Bride of Liao Manor. This is an adventure I put up on the blog, but I've been reworking it to make as a 30-page PDF, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but I'm probably going to meander a little bit at first. I did want to mention that Strange Tales of New England is available in PDF. People can go check that out on Drive-Thru or at the Studio 2 website. I also submitted the print files, and I actually had to resubmit the cover because there was a mix-up on what poundage paper we were using. It turned out to be a good mix-up because it looks like we're going to be using heavier paper. We're going to be using 70 pound instead of 50 pound, but that changes the spine width, so I had to revise the cover, or I had to have the layout guy, Drew, revise the cover. But yeah, so that's been resubmitted, and hopefully that will go through, and then I will get the proof, and then once I have the proof, if that's all good, then we can go to print and everything. So as always, these things sometimes take a little while, and I am going to yawn because it's very late. Again, this is a late night podcast, so I'm very groggy. I just finished watching a movie called The Ghost Lovers, which I'm doing a review for, and I've been getting very slow back into my reviews because I was feeling really sick during the month. I'm still not feeling well, but I was feeling like awful for several months there, and I just was like not really able to write reviews and stuff like that. I had a lot of problems, but one of the big things that was happening was I was getting nauseous all the time, like perpetual nausea, and there were a number of other things, and some of that seems to be lifting, but some of it still seems to be something is going on. So I'm going to a bunch of doctors because I don't know exactly what it is. I've gone through all the different possibilities, but you know, but I have to see specialist after specialist and all this stuff. But again, I'm not like a spring chicken, so as you get older, you accrue more issues, and sometimes something hits you and then it doesn't let go for a while, or you have to go and get something resolved or get a surgery or whatever. But I have been getting slowly back into writing and all that kind of stuff. I was really out of commission. If you look at the blog and you look at the podcast, you'll see there are big gaps. Like, we have done some movie reviews and stuff, but I think if you look, I don't know, somewhere around October is when I think it happened, because that's when you see that like my production level is really kind of diminishing. I think the around Halloween is when it really started to occur, but I can't exactly remember. And then it kind of ramped up, and so I do apologize for the lack of communication on the podcast and on the blog, and also just for the lack of reviews that I've been putting out. But I was watching The Ghost Lovers, which was a really good movie. It's I don't want to mispronounce the director's name because it's very late, but it's a South Korean director. Lived a very interesting life. He ended up getting kidnapped by the North Koreans about 4 years after he made this movie, and he had a career well before he did this. He made like 2 Shaw Brothers movies or something, and then he got kidnapped, and the North Korean regime made him produce movies for them for about 8 years before he escaped. And then he went on to work on movies like the sequels to Three Ninjas and stuff like that. So he had a pretty interesting life. But he's kind of like a Kubrick or King Hu type guy. Like, he makes very distinct kind of artistic movies, but movies that are very that are still very palatable. And the Ghost Lovers is a very interesting film because it number one, it captures a lot of things that I really like about a lot of the stuff that's in like Strange Tales from the Chinese studio, a lot of these like classic Shaw Brothers horror movies, but also like the horror movies that you have from Hong Kong in like the 80s and 90s, and even earlier. But it sort of has that thing where the ghosts are all very human, and sometimes it really depends on the movie. Sometimes they play it up more for horror. Sometimes the horror isn't as important as the romance and the drama. But it allows them to explore the ghosts as characters and to have human-like interactions with the protagonist or whatever. And so in this movie, the ghost is this woman who dies before she's going to be married to a man named Mr. Han. And he's kind of like seems like a landed gentry type. I think it might be set during the Song Dynasty. I'm not exactly sure, but she dies. She's trying to stay alive before, so that because he's on his way to see her, and she dies before they can get married, and her longing for their love and to be married and all this stuff sort of condemns her to wander as a ghost until she's able to consummate with him. And like a standard trope in these stories and these movies is that that the ghosts deplete the man's yang energy, and through a variety of means, but it's often through some kind of romantic interaction. And so so every night that she's visiting him, he's he's getting sick and more sick and more sick. And so it's but it's just a very well done film. It looks beautiful. The way that it kind of weaves between comedy, horror, and into this melodrama, I thought was fascinating. It was and it's a slow burn. It's like a very subdued kind of film. This isn't like this isn't. You don't want to go into this movie like expecting really big scares. Like the scares that do emerge are subtle and personal, and some of them are actually more focused on the experience of the ghost than the human. So it's it's the kind of film that takes time in order to make the stakes matter and to make you care when that stuff happens. They really have to build the characters and build the world and all this stuff. So it takes its time, and I think sometimes viewers might have a hard time with that if they go in with the wrong expectations. And so I would just but again, this one was part of a box set, which also it's the Shaw Shock Volume 2, and I think there's The Bride from Hell, which is a very good movie. I think I've covered it on the blog. I can't remember. And The Enchanting Shadow, which I did do a review of up on the Eastern Kick site. And so it's a good box set. What's nice about this one, because The Enchanting Shadow is the aspect ratio. It's an older movie, so it's got like an older aspect ratio, and it's harder to get really good prints of it. So that one, it looks as good as it can, but this looks quite pristine. So I really enjoyed that, and that kind of leads me into the whole Bride of Liao Manor, because it's it's obviously drawn from these types of stories. And people can go on the blog and they can take a look and see the material that I have for it. If you look under the Strange Tales of Song Ling section on the Bedrock blog, there's an adventure called The Bride of Liao Manor in there. And it's like a 2 to 4 player level 1 to 3 characters. And it was written for Strange Tales of Song Ling. What I wanted to do is I wanted to take that adventure and turn it into an Ogre Gate adventure and make it a 30-page PDF. It's going to be an Ogre Gate / Strange Tales adventure, so it'll be compatible with both. But what that means, because the games are so different, is, this mechanically they're very similar, but in terms of the tone of the settings and everything, they're very different. I really have to think about how it's going to play out, how feasible this is going to be. So I've started work on it, and I apologize for the yawns, but I did some of the basic conversions of things, and it's going to take a little bit of time to see if those work out well, because it's more of an art than a science. You can't really just say, okay, well, these things need to all be 2 higher, or this all needs to be like that. There's a lot of judgment calls, and some things don't translate 1-to-1 from one setting to the next, so you really have to revise them. You have to make changes to things just to fit them to the setting. My plan is to do so if you've seen The Bride of Liao Manor, it's a short mystery adventure. I want to keep that, and I want to revise it a bit. I want to fit it into the Ogre Gate setting. So in the blog entry, it's more of a generic, put this wherever you want, and it's vaguely set in ancient China. In the Ogre Gate version, I'm going to have, number one, terminology gets a little bit muddled, because in Ogre Gate, things are divided into prefectures and districts, and the Bride of Liao Manor follows a more conventional prefecture and county it's just terminology, so it doesn't really matter that much. But I have to tweak that so that it goes from being Hencheon County to Hencheon District. And so one of the ideas is we've fleshed out prefectures, like we've done, like we did the Strange Tales, Strange Land of Lifan and the Ogre Inn, which covers Lifan, which is essentially, it's not a prefecture, it's a country, but it's essentially like one region. We did the Sons of Lady 87, which gives you the Fanju prefecture. And so what this is going to be is I'm going to locate the stuff that was in the Bride of Liao Manor in the Shangchang prefecture, which is something I've been working on for my own purposes, and I'm probably going to put it up on the blog because it's too, like, I wanted to put this up as a prefectural supplement, but it's too. I'm trying to do PDFs that are under 30 pages right now, and so this is going to be too big. So what I'll probably do is I'll probably still have Rob make a map of it, but I'll end up putting this on the blog instead. But the Bride of Liao Manor is going to be a PDF, and that is going to be one of the districts in that prefecture. So it's like the westernmost prefecture. It's possible I might just pare that down to one hex rather than the whole district, but for right now I'm thinking that it could be the whole district. We'll see if that works, because the other issue is it's a 30-page PDF. It's probably about 15 pages of mystery adventure, and then maybe 20 pages, say 15 to 20 pages of mystery adventure, and 15 to 10 pages of very minimalist setting supplement, so kind of almost like a sandboxy type thing. And this particular prefecture is all focused on horror. It's sort of like I kind of experimented with that a bit in Strange Land of Lifan, but this really gets deep into the horror. So it's like it's a pure horror prefecture. I kind of like doing that with some of the different regions, and there's always an explanation, so it's not like you just suddenly go in there and for no apparent reason it's like that. It has to do with the nature of the prefect, the prefect who runs the region. And so, again, we'll see how that goes, but it takes time to sort of revise and rewrite and convert these things. And so what I'm wondering is how the tone is going to feel when I make it into an Ogre Gate thing, because Ogre Gate has more martial heroes. There's just things that you would expect in an area in Ogre Gate to have that make it a little bit challenging to retain some of the feel of the region that was described in the Bride of Liao Manor in the blog. Now, if for the Strange Tales stat blocks, that's not an issue, but for the Ogre Gate stat blocks, it could switch things up. So again, we'll see, or maybe we'll just try to have this one district kind of more emulate the tone of the Bride of Liao sort of region. It's just one. It was just kind of placed in this one county, and again, that's still up on the blog. People can go read it. I'm not going to take it down from the blog either. So even when this comes out, this will still be up, and really what this is going to do is this is going to just kind of revise it a bit. It's going to give it more, art and maps and that kind of thing. And, we'll fingers crossed. This is my first attempt at one of these 30-page PDFs, so hopefully this one comes out good. If not, maybe the next one. But the thing that's been going on that I should mention to people is publishing has changed a lot in the past few years. So just to give an example, the reason that we're using 70-pound paper instead of 50 is kind of ironically because it's too expensive now to go into distribution. So it turns out that when I go into distribution with the whole process that I have set up, that affects how much of a cut I get, how much of a cut other people get. When I'm not in distribution, that changes. So we're able to actually, again, this isn't definite, but we should be able to get the 70-pound paper this time. But we're not going to be getting into distribution. So what's that? And again, that's for Strange Tales in New England. And so, what that does is that means that we won't be able to. Again, I don't know for sure because I've never put out a book this way, but just based on my experience and what I've seen, we're not going to be able to sell as many books. Number one, we're not going to be able to get into as many platforms. I don't know how that's going to affect the longevity of the book either. Um, but what I've also been hearing is I think most people are not getting, or because of the cost, most people are not opting for the distribution option. Again, I don't have like a God's eye view of the whole industry. I'm just talking about like my one little window into it. So I could be take what I say with a grain of salt. Um, but but I mean I've just been seeing over the past several years that it's just things have been getting more, as you know, like raw materials are getting more expensive. Um, there's obviously all kinds of things going on with trade that can also affect that stuff. But even that aside, there's material costs that have been getting more and more expensive. If you go to the grocery store, you probably noticed that your food is getting more expensive, and um, so when we make a book, we've had to the cover prices have been going up and up and up and up, and I feel like there is just a point where you just can't do that anymore, and so what happened this time around was if we wanted to go into distribution, we would have had to really raise the price well over. Like right now, the price is $49.99 for the Strange Tales of New England, which is like a 200 and something page book. I can't remember the exact page count. To me, that still feels kind of high, right? In the past, I would have wanted to have set that at like 29.90, whatever. Something more, more affordable. Uh, but it's going to have to be $49.99. It would have had to been much higher if we wanted distribution. And so, and again, this isn't really anybody's fault in the industry. It's not like anybody is messing with us or screwing us or anything like that. It's just that that's just sort of the cost of doing business now. And so again, these 30-page PDFs, I might also print them. I'm going to see what the economics of that are what but late night discussion, sorry. um, but I don't know, so I'm just gonna, for right now, my focus is okay, let's just get some 30-page PDFs and see what happens. And occasionally, if the PDFs do well, if the other books continue to sell and we're able to have enough of a revenue stream, I'll eventually put out another book at some point that's beefier, but that's down the road, and a lot of things might end up on the blog if they don't end up in print or whatever. So if I have material that I've been working on that I really want to share, I'm gonna put up on the blog. If it's too big to go into one of these 30-page PDF deals, but again, that's just sort of the reality of things, as things have changed a lot. And I should say that's just that's how all this stuff affects me. I don't know how it's going to affect other companies. Like if people are operating in a different tier of the hobby, if they're a bigger company, they'll have different options. But we've always been sort of on one of the lower tiers. We're not like a major company, so so the profit margins are always very narrow, and so we just have to be very careful when we make these kind of decisions. I have friends who are relying more on Kickstarter, so I might look into that. But I'm just not a fan. I understand the value. I understand that it's a model that has worked. I just don't like the idea of it just for myself. I'm just not, and I'll explain why. I feel like when you kickstart something, you're really you're really what you're looking for is investors. Really, that's what you're asking for. Which is fine. I have no problem with people getting investors. But what that means is, instead of writing a book for myself and hoping there's an audience for it, which is kind of how, and again, not just myself, but my game group and people that work with me and stuff like that. But this is a very boutique kind of thing where it's, I was just talking about art tourism and in cinema. It's kind of more that style of game design where it's like these are games that I am interested in playing at my own table, and I want to put them out there and hope other people like them. Once you bring in investors, that changes things. Then you're much more, at least in my opinion. I mean, I'm sure there are people who do Kickstarters, they don't feel beholden at all, and that's totally fine. I don't know, what the sort of contract is they have with their Kickstarter supporters. But for me, I just feel like that would feel like say I don't know how many backers you get in a typical Kickstarter, but let's say you get 50 backers, right? And it's probably, I don't know, maybe that's low, maybe that's high. But if you get 50 backers, I would feel like I have all 50 of those people looking over my shoulder. Now, we do have fans who obviously buy the books, and that in a sense having like a loyal fan base of any kind could be similar, I suppose. But I feel like the fan base that we've cultivated understands that with each book, there's an experimental side to it. There's a desire to, for me to just kind of do whatever is of interest to me at the time. And so I feel like they also give, if they don't like a new book that comes out, they might like the next one, and they're kind of, that's just kind of how they go. They don't necessarily feel the need to get every single book that comes out if I put something out that isn't of interest to them. But again, I feel like the dynamic would be a bit different if we did a Kickstarter. Now, again, maybe at some point that'll just be like an inevitable thing where you have to do it. But that's just not how we've done things, and I'm very much a creature of habit. So I haven't really, as people have probably seen from how we make books, it hasn't some of the style has shifted. Some of the I think we've gotten better over time. I would say, like, when I look at something like Sons of Late 87, I think that's a much better quality book than some of our earlier books. But I follow generally the same pattern. It's kind of, I have a way of doing things, and that's kind of the way it's done. And we don't really mess with the formula too much. So anyways, that's the idea. Is again, it's a ghost adventure. If you haven't read it, it was really successful. What I had done was I think 4 or 5. It's probably 4. I think it was 4. I can't remember, but I had done a slew of these Strange Tales adventures because I kind of wanted to promote Strange Tales of Songling more. That's a game that I really wish had gotten more traction. It came out like right when COVID hit, and I don't know how much that impacted things, but I feel like it probably had an effect because shortly after there was actually a boom in the hobby because people were stuck at home, and suddenly they were playing lots of games, and there was actually kind of a boom. But it came out like right when people didn't know exactly what was going on, and so it felt like I didn't really get it might have ended up the same, but I felt like I didn't really get quite the chance to market it and promote it the way I normally would. And obviously, these days marketing and promotion is different too. So that's kind of, I guess, in the end, it's who knows what would have happened. But anyways, I made these adventures because, and again, I should mention for people that don't follow this, late night podcasts are just naturally meandering. I just kind of go with the flow of things, and sometimes I deviate wildly from the subject. Sometimes I sit here trying to remember something forever. So that's just kind of the nature of the late night stuff. I do it because I think it injects a little bit of a surreal, dreamlike quality to things, and that sometimes lets me it enables me to kind of have connective thoughts I might not otherwise have, and I just kind of like it. It just kind of sort of sounds like late night radio, so that's why I like doing it. But I had done these short adventures basically with the aim of promoting the Strange Tales of Songling game a little bit more, and I liked all the ones that I made, but definitely, and actually looking at it, I think there were three because the 2 others are actually older ones. But Bride of Liao Manor was the most popular, the one that got the strongest positive reaction when I ran it. They all got good reactions. I also liked The Frog God's Daughter. That one was a lot of fun, and that one was inspired directly by a Pu Songling story. And the Temple of the 18 Arhats was an idea I really liked, but I think I was doing this all inside of an October month, and I think it was October. I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure it was like something like that or around that time. And I was really trying to there was a bigger idea than I had time to do. And so I don't feel like I feel like if I did that one again, I would make some changes. I would adjust things. That one was also based pretty directly on a Pu Songling story about this. I think it was like a black scorpion spirit that was haunting a temple. I can't remember exactly. but it ends up going in a wildly different direction. There is a scorpion, I believe, in the adventure, or something related to the original Pu Songling story, but the Arhats are really the focus. I thought they were a really cool idea. It's just that if I had more time, I would have been able to individualize each of those a little bit more. There were just little things I would have been able to do with more time. But the Bride of Liao Manor was I ran that one a bunch of times, and it was very popular. It was also a lot of fun to run, and I just really liked the villain of the adventure. I thought she was a very cool and interesting character for an RPG session. So that was that's the adventure that we're kind of looking to refurbish into this 30-page thing. I also have some other 30-page ideas. I don't know which ones will get done and which ones won't. I mean, some of them are actually done. Like I have we have a bundle called The Joy of Sex, which is sex, SECTS, so like martial sex. And I have a document that I'm working on that might use that same title. I don't know. I just don't want to create confusion, because we have the bundle, and then maybe we'll call it more Joy of Sex or something. I don't know, but I thought that was a very fun way to approach the subject, and this is basically a sect management book. Basically, I think everything's done in it except for there's like a section in there where I'm kind of giving examples of things using movies and stuff like that. I need to rework some of that section, and I have to look at it again, because there might be some other elements that are absent. But again, we'll see. I came up with like 5 or 6 different methods for dealing with sect conflict and stuff like that. So, we'll if we put that one out, hopefully that will land well. And I had started on a Wuxia Sandbox PDF, but I don't know if I'm going to finish that one or not, because I already have a Wuxia Sandbox thing up on the blog, and if I do the Wuxia Sandbox PDF, I want to work on a little bit more. There's also an interesting one, and this one's pretty much done. I just have to tweak a few things. There's a table that I still got to work out. There's a thing called the Apostles, which I thought was a pretty cool idea for Sartorius. It basically is like an attempt to kind of introduce a mode of play where the characters are not Satori, but they're apostles of an avatar of the supreme deity in the setting. So it's kind of, it sort of like draws a lot from the Book of Acts and things like that. Sartorius is very biblical. I don't know if people caught that who played the game, but it's based on a number of things. Now, it's based on a lot of Middle East and ancient history, a lot of Mediterranean history. There's also like a lot of Dark Age stuff in there, but if you really look at it, the focus of the setting is much more Mediterranean. And there's a lot of stuff that draws on sort of both the early church history, and on just the general spread of things like mystery cults and that sort of stuff. And so, and also just religious conflict that was kind of going on at that time between different groups. And so, and that sort of emerges through the Satori themselves, where they can have these followers and stuff like that. But what I wanted to have characters who could come in with like a completely different point of view, because like the way that Sartorius works is the Satori are these beings who've not inherited, but they've kind of been born innately with the small aspect of a god spirit in them. There's a god named Senga who was killed in the history of the setting, and his spirit fragmented into all these pieces and settled into different beings on the planet. And so some people are born with just a spark of Senga in them, and that's what allows them to be these spellcasters called Satori. And the more that people worship the Satori, the more powerful they get. And so what I wanted was characters who were not as powerful as the Satori, but had the ability to draw on faith and on blessings from a god with certain powers that allowed them to essentially fight the Satori, but in a very different way. So, like if the apostles went in there armed with pitchforks and tried to take on a Satori, they probably wouldn't succeed. But they have the power of exorcism. They have all these different powers, and again, the powers are randomized that they get. They get these different powers that are kind of bestowed upon them, as sort of their way of serving this figure named Galen, who's kind of an analog of Jesus, say, and so, it also just kind of recasts. It's sort of like it again. It's not like the setting is being upturned or anything, but it introduces a threat to the Satori themselves, so that if you were to not want to do the apostles thing that's in the book, you could still use the book so that you would have a new threat to throw at your Satori characters, which I thought was interesting. And they're very much antagonistic towards the Satori. So, that's sort of one of their chief hallmarks, is their aggression towards Satori, and vice versa. So, I just and also it just fit the setting, because again, the setting has this very sort of, and when I say biblical, I don't mean it's like religiously educational or anything like that, or that it's promoting any kind of religious idea. I just mean it's inspired very heavily by that kind of that kind of text, those kinds of early developments in the history of the church and things like that. And so and again, I think there's I've always liked the setting. It's been a little bit hard for me to revisit it. And again, I don't want to get into it here too much, but when we put out Sartorius, I think Bill died. What do I say? I don't have the timing correct, but it was not. It was very shortly after, maybe even before it came out. I can't recall. I know it had been printed, because he had a print copy of the book and was using it in the campaign. But for that reason, I just find it a difficult setting to revisit. And so this was a way for me to revisit it in a slightly different light, so that it wasn't as, I don't know, it just wasn't as dark. I did do a short campaign after Bill died, but I just found the setting very hard to run after that. I had, just not a pleasant thing to do for me. So this was one of the first times I'd run Sartorius in a while. And doing it in this way, it really did feel kind of different. It's still not a setting I'm 100% comfortable doing, because I think honestly, if that hadn't happened, we would have, instead of putting out Ogre Gate would have just been like a small little side thing, and we would have probably really kind of leaned into Sartorius. I just can't. So we did the so we did do it this way, and I ran a short campaign. I'm probably going to run another one in a little while, because I have to finish that table. But it was interesting. It worked. It does require that the GM be nimble on their feet. You have to be. So I'm the kind of GM who can really handle things as they emerge and connecting them to other things in the setting, and just kind of reacting to things that the players do. And so, one of the things that I realized as I've sort of gotten questions from people and given advice is every GM is very different in that respect. And so I don't know if this is going to be the kind of game that everybody is going to like, or the kind of supplement for Sartorius that everybody is going to like. But if you're that kind of GM, I think you'll enjoy it. And so it's also one of those things where there's a lot of room for interpretation on the GM's part. So one thing that I've discovered is some GMs really like everything very clearly sort of delineated, and this isn't that kind of thing. You kind of, if you're gonna if you're going to sort of try to do something in the style of the Book of Acts, you really have to have an openness around things that, and I feel like I still codified things quite a bit, but there needs to be an openness so that you can kind of capture that feel, and that requires empowering the GM and giving the players the understanding that things are fluid. And so, again, but I thought it was a very interesting book, and also it had some interesting. Let me see. I'll give you guys, if I can find it. I know this late night thing is going on, but if you've made it this far, I might as well give you a little preview of some of why I liked this thing. So I got to go back into my folder for Sartorius, which I hardly ever do. So that's why I'm pausing here. Oh, okay, no, it's got its own folder. All right, that's perfect. Okay, so here we go. Here's the document, and the document itself is it's actually not too lean at this point. Let's see how many. It's it's about 6,000 words. So it's not going to be a huge thing, but it's going to be like a little supplement. It wouldn't even really. I can't do my mental calculations right now, but I don't think that would be. It's probably going to be like a 10 or 15 page PDF, I think. But one of the things that I do to kind of set the tone is I have these excerpts from the different scriptures that the followers of Galen use, and so I thought that this kind of gave it a nice sort of feeling of mood, and so this is from the Book of Charis, chapter 8 is what this one is from, and again there's a bunch of these, and so it says in the first days of his ministry, storm clouds gathered across the empire, and prodigious eagles appeared in great number. The supreme pontiff and bishops feared the wrath of the god Ramos. There were rumors that Mount Augustu swelled and was nearing eruption. Galen led his followers from the edge of Midbar to the feet of Mount Augustu, where the ash and clouds were clear for all to see. He stood, rebuked the mountain, and said, "Be still, willful child of Atia." Atia is the supreme god in the setting. "For you are no higher than your followers high up on that mountain." The storm clouds died and the eruption ceased. The disciples looked to one another and said, "Surely he must be truly great if even Ramos obeys him." So, again, these are clearly modeled after, and that's not modeled after the Book of Acts. That's modeled after one of the Gospels. But that's something that I was doing in this. I was trying to sort of do this and again, it's not like I'm going into like an archaic King James style of writing here, but I am trying to sort of follow the general feel of a well-translated version of the Bible. And I thought that one really kind of gives you a sense of the change this character presents to the setting, because Ramos is like an important god, and so that gives you a pretty good sense. Here's another one that really gives you a sense of how the setting book is intending to pit Satori and these apostle characters. Let's see. So I think this is the right one. Hopefully it is. So it says, as they departed from the boat to the shores of Ori, and a Satori named Bessarion, who claimed to also be a prophet, brought his followers to admire Galen and hear his teachings. And again, Galen is sort of the guy that these apostles are following. After hearing the Lord's words, Bessarion asked to unite their men against the Rhonians and ruin the towers of Permistus. Permistus that's the Satori order in the region that this is all taking place. But Galen, knowing his intention, said, "I have not come to bring war on the sorcerers of Rhonia, but to cast the beast from all Satori." Bessarion cried out to his followers, "The son of Atia has come to destroy us. Let his blood fill the sea." Galen reprimanded him, "Be silent, the power is not your own. I command you to leave this man." The spirit of the beast fled Bessarion's body like lightning to the sky. When his followers saw the frailty of the sorcerer, they begged Galen to forgive them. So, again, here, this one is, he uses the term the beast. Number one, I like the beast because it's, it's very Revelations. It's also, I'm a big Iron Maiden fan. But the reason that he uses that language, which I thought was kind of neat, was the Satori get their power from the god Senga, and Senga is the god of the ogres. He's sort of symbolized as a lion, and so this idea that he would be, this beast inhabiting the Satori as almost like a demonic force, I thought was interesting, and so that's why I use that language. And there's a number of other of these things. There's one that gets into sort of the nature of the ogres, which I thought, because what was interesting to me is in the core book, the ogres are presented as cursed because they killed their god. Or not they didn't, but one of their kings did, and so they have no access to his power. They have other abilities. They're actually resistant to Satori magic, and they're pretty powerful in general. So they actually do make pretty good player characters, but they're presented as cursed because they can't get this gift that the other races can get. And in one of these passages, Galen kind of makes the observation that they're not cursed, they're blessed. And so because he just, he from his point of view, to be plagued with these powers is not a good thing. So I thought that was kind of, again, it just was an interesting way to come and revisit the setting. And the way that it works is all of the apostles get miracles as they don't get that many. I think they get like 3 miracles. But the miracles are pretty, and the miracles are randomized. But like, so one of them would be exorcism. There's also ones like taming the beast, prophecy, rebuke, pacify, break spell, armor of the Lord, that kind of thing. Tongues. They're all things that you would. They all adhere generally with. Again, it's a little bit more fantastical because it's a fantasy setting, but they try to sort of abide by the stuff that you see in the Acts of the Apostles. So that's the idea. So and then I go through and I describe each of these, and then we also have a whole section on theology, on the different communities. Again, this doesn't go into great depth because it's just a little supplement, but it gives you like the different apostle communities, and they all kind of have different names. So there's like the Apians, the Sakine, the Apollonians, the Bessarians, the Carusites. There's all these different groups. The Carusites are a community that was built around the apostle Carus, who's still alive, and it gets, and I won't spoil it here, but then it gets into the sort of the beliefs that they have about Galen and all this stuff, and so then we have a reworking of the follower system to make it fit the apostles, and then I have a church community role, which is a lot like the followers role. Now the big thing is I sort of established the main thing that happens positively on the table, but I need to sort of figure out if the other entries are the same or different from the followers table entries, and so that's the big thing. And so anyways, how we going on? Another yawn. But yeah, so that's something that, again, I don't know if and when I'm going to put that one out, but that's one that I was working on, and it was a fun thing to do. I enjoyed it, and we'll see if we can put it out at some point. I make a lot of games that I don't actually put out, so that's something that people might not realize. I have tons of just games that we've sort of made and then play tested a bit, and I would have gone and put them into production if the pipeline allowed for it, but pipelines are fairly limited things, so so some of them end up on the blog, some of them just end up in a folder somewhere on my computer I never used, and so I don't think this will become one of those, but it certainly runs the risk, because it has a lot of the symptoms of that kind of document, just in terms of I was very excited about it. I manically produced it, did some play tests, and now I'm kind of working on some other things, and if I wait too long to get back to it, that can be it. Because the other thing that can happen is you can have a section of this sort of, the whole thing is pretty much done except for this one table, but that's the kind of thing that can kill this kind of project, because if you go back to it, then you can't get into the same headspace or figure out what it was you were trying to do with that section of the game. It's almost not even worth it, because you'll just end up making it you'll what you will make will not fit, if you've sort of lost the the drive or momentum or just the sense of where you were going. Um, so yeah, so I mean, and that happens all the time, like all the time. I have like countless folders filled with these kind of things, and often what will happen is you do that because you know that, if you first off, none of this is ever wasted, because when you're designing things, it's like anything else. The more you do it, the better you get. And so it's kind of like if you're writing songs, like, you can write 40 songs and never use them for anything, but just the process of writing those songs is going to make you a better songwriter. Same with books, like, what is, I don't remember what the saying is, but generally there are a lot of sayings about writing books and short stories and that sort of thing, where it's like, you got to write like 20 short stories before you can really get good, or you got to write like, 4 books before you can really, 4 novels before you can really write a good novel. And I'm sure that some people have those numbers much higher than I just said, but there is like truth to that. And so I think, even though we've obviously put out a lot of games, still find it helpful to do these kind of things, because you're flexing different muscles, you're doing all kinds and then sometimes what ends up happening is you create a concept, or you develop an idea or a mechanic, and even though that document that you were working on, or that game that you were working on, maybe in totality it will never be released, that mechanic is something that you can still draw on. It's still a tool that you've created that you can pull on and use for something else. So I think it's always useful, to be able to make stuff and just put it aside sometimes. But this is one I honestly would like to put out. So hopefully I'll remember to get back to that table in a timely manner, because I'm looking at the document. There's like nothing else to make but that. And I think that would be a fun one. I don't think I would charge too much either for it, because it's a fairly lean and experimental, supplement. It's kind of similar to like the fantasy supplement that we did for Sartorius. I think we call it the classic fantasy pack or something like that. It's that style of document. And yeah, so that covers everything, I think. I hope that I haven't been too long-winded. I know I've been going on for quite some time, but again, this is all pent-up stuff, because I have done a few talks, but this is the first week I've even been feeling moderately okay. So I felt like I had more to say. And again, I apologize. I know that there haven't been a lot of updates. That's pretty typical of the Bedrock blog and things like that. But I did want to give people an explanation for it. So I will let you go, and until next time, I will talk to you later.